Alright, so I've had some questions about why I'm running the build I'm running, specifically what is the build I'm running. And I thought I'd go over it because, or not just, I thought I'd do a little bit more than just linking it in chat, because there's a specific reason I'm using this. And it's a bit counterintuitive since I'm using curses on a power build, and curses is usually considered a Condi trait line. So the reason I made this build is I wanted to solve one of the issues that were common with both of the existing meta builds, because currently there's two existing meta builds. There's standard Power Reaper, which looks something like this, with Soul Reaping, and this is what you'll usually see off of Power Necro is Spite, typical things, because Soul Reaping, you've got all your Life Force, and you've got Blighter's Boon, and, this was popularized by Nos, and they usually use a staff rather than a greatsword, but you do see a greatsword. And then there's Condi Necro, which is usually something along the lines of Curses, Soul Reaping, and of course Reaper. The reason I did not use Soul Reaping, which blows a lot of Necro's minds because a lot of people consider Soul Reaping mandatory, is because the issue you run into with Soul Reaping this setup on a Power Necro is you're really limited in the amount of corrupts you can bring. And if you're bringing a Necro to PvP, you need to have a lot of corrupts, because there's no real point if you're not packing a lot of corrupts. You'd just be better off playing a Dragon Hunter or whatever that can bring more damage and be more mobile and bring other things to the team, because realistically, you're a Necro. You're here to kill supports. That's why you exist, is to kill supports in bunker, which means you need to have the Boon Rip and you need to have the debuff power. And this does not have that. I'm sorry, it just doesn't. You've got a little bit DPS off this and the 5% modifier off Strength of Undeath, but other than that, there's not much damage here. There's no corrupts here. And that's where, and of course there's Condi Necro, which has tons of corrupts, it's just puking corrupts out the wazoo, both in the forms of Path of Corruption, Weakening Shroud. Of course you've got the Scepter auto attack, and then, utility corrupts. But the issue with Condi Necro is that it's a very polarized build in that the matchups that it's good against, specifically Bunker NGs and Support Ellies, it's extremely good against, but against other things, it just really can't do much. It's just, if you're dealing with a mobile class, it can't touch them because it takes so long for a Condi Necro to ramp up their damage. Now, Power Necro can deal with more mobile classes better because, again, it's instant damage. You don't have to ramp, you don't have to wait for your bleed stacks to stack up, you don't need to worry about getting all those cover Condis lined up. But on the other hand, you're not packing corrupts. So I wanted to find a way to get Power Necro to have the support killing capabilities that Condi Necro has, while still retaining, the ability to snipe a thief when he's not dodging or whatever. Although I don't recommend trying to 1v1 thieves with Power Necro, but it does perform better against them, and it performs better against things like Guardians that are more mobile and jumping around, and anyone doing a jumping puzzle or likes to kite, you're going to want to be playing a Power Necro, because Condi Necro is just not going to cut it. So to that end, I needed corrupts, which means I need curses, because that's about the only way you're going to get the necessary corrupts, because this brings Path of Corruption, it brings an extra corrupt on Shroud Entry, and I cannot overstate how strong Path of Corruption is. It's RS2, it's 2 corrupts on RS2, which you use rotationally. It is a deterministic corrupt, it's not a random proc corrupt or something, it's something you control. And you just use this so much. This is a 6-second cooldown without Soul Reaping. And you're just going to use that a lot. You can use it for targeted corrupts. You'll see that a lot in my gameplay videos. And just not having it really hurts your utilities. And of course, Curses also brings other things to the table. Specifically, Weakening. Now, I've seen a lot of people say this isn't that good of a trait, because it's, they like to focus on the Enfeeble proc, which, the Enfeeble proc, it is a boon corrupt on Shroud Entry, it is a low radius, and it does have an animation delay, so it's not the greatest thing. But what makes this trait really good is the second sentence on that tooltip. Critical hits inflict weakness on a 10-second cooldown, and that's 5 seconds of weakness. That's 50% weakness uptime just whenever you're doing anything. And weakness is huge. Like, if you're trying to survive against a power class, you need to be applying weakness. And I would argue that I get about as much survivability out of this weakness application as you would get just taking Soul Reaping. And of course there's other good things here. Target the weak, that's a flat critical chance increase just all the time. Obviously, you don't have nearly as many Condis as a Condi Necro does, so you won't get as much value out of it. It does give you some condition damage scaler off your precision. So like I'm using Marauder, so I get 266 extra condition damage because of Target the Weak. Obviously, since I'm Power Necro, that's not all that exciting. It does make my Corrupts hit harder, and my Poison from Maris too hit harder. So that's not... those stats aren't going to waste. I'm already discussed Path of Corruption. Furious Demise, I mean Fury on Entering Shroud, more crit. Obviously, these crit increases aren't like as good as Soul Reaping's 50% crit chance while in Shroud, but on the other hand, this one works all the time even when you're out of Shroud, and you know, 20% crit increase when you go in Shroud. You'll be critting most of the time. You'll have 74% crit with that, with the Marauder Amulet. Like, so you'll be critting most of the time until the Fury runs out. And another thing is this does proc Blighter's Boon down here, so you'll get 165 healing. I mean, obviously that's not something to write home about, but you know, it's there. And if they'd ever bug fix Spiteful Spirit so that it actually granted retaliation like it's supposed to, you could actually get, you know, 4 or 5 Blighter Boons proc on Entering Shroud, which, you know, that's like 500 to 1k healing right there. I'm using Plague Sending, obviously passive Condi Clear. This is a must-have trait for dueling a Necro. Like, a lot of Necro duels will come down to who gets the more opportune Plague Sending proc. Obviously, if you're not fighting a Condi Necro, I would recommend Chilling Darkness, because this, obviously a lot of people have pointed out, does have an IC, and you don't actually have that many blinds on as a Necro. But this procs off Fury Corrupts, so any target that has Fury and you corrupt that, you get this. And while, yeah, you're not a Condi Necro, so you don't get the bleeds from doing this, Chill is a nasty condition. That is a huge shutdown condition. So just keeping that on a target is a good way to keep them from running away, keeps them from kiting you, makes their cooldown stack. It's just a really nice thing to keep up on a target. Obviously, if you're dealing with Condi classes, you will want Plague Sending, though, and this is usually my default pick. Bar Precision, I mean, random bleed application. Hey, it's another can't even talk today. It's another cover condition, you know. The Condi classes on your team will like you to be applying that, particularly if you're working like with a Burn Guard or something. They'll like you to be applying those cover Condis for them. And now, of course, these are standard. I don't know why I had Spiteful Renewal. You should be using Bitter Chill. This is just standard picks, more Boon Rip, extra Chill application. Bitter Chill is huge for Power Necro, because if you do the Shroud 4-5 combo, or 5-4 combo, sorry, which is the whirling in the chill field, that's 25 stacks of Vuln just off this trait. And I'm going to point out that Ghastly Claws now has a 1% modifier, damage mod, per stack of vulnerability. In addition to the fact that each vulnerability stack is also a 1% damage mod from all sources. So Vuln stacking is something you should be paying attention to as a Power Necro, because it does cause all of your teammates to be doing extra damage, and it does make particularly Ghastly Claws, but all of your skills do more damage. One thing you'll see me do a lot is I'll do the Shroud 4-5 combos, and then I'll drop Shroud and just use Ghastly Claws, because with all that vulnerability from the 5-4 combo up, you can easily get a 14k Ghastly Claws on a light armor target. Obviously, if they're toughness stacked, it won't do as much, but, you know. And then Chill of Death, Boon Rip. I've kind of been playing around with Unholy Fervor, which is the Axe trait. It is worth noting that I haven't actually tested this, but according to the wiki, this trait will affect Shroud if you go into Shroud while equipping an Axe. I haven't actually tested that, so that makes it a little more palpable. I wish, the one thing that really hurts this trait and makes me generally go with Chill of Death over it is the fact that the 10% damage modifier is only for targets with vulnerability, so if they're cleansing themselves, you're not getting much out of that trait. And the cooldowns on Shroud skills just really aren't long enough to justify needing a cooldown reduction. Spiteful Spirit, the best trait in all of Spite. And probably one of the more important playmaking traits. I know a lot of people like Close to Death for the damage. This isn't as big as you think it is. And again, it's got a health threshold that kind of kills it. You're not going to use this because we're not using signets here. Spiteful Spirit, what's nice about this is it's peck damage. It's instant. It goes off the moment you hit Shroud. Shroud is obviously instant and can be used while stunned. It's really good for getting that last peck of damage. It is a corrupt, so you can get those clutch corrupts, and you know it combos nice with the enfeeble proc on curses. And I've done, like, I don't know if I have the video up or not, but I've like stolen beasts using Spiteful Spirit. Like, it is the best pecking skill a Necro has. And then, so that explains these two. And then, of course, Reaper. Why am I using Shouts? That's the next question, is why I'm using Shouts. Well, the reason I'm using Shouts, and obviously Blighter's Boon, is because I don't have Soul Reaping. I don't have any Life Force generation from Soul Reaping, and I don't have... And my utility slots are kind of crowded. I don't like having to take Spectral Armor. I mean, obviously I'll use it when necessary, but I just don't like being forced into that. So what I needed is, I needed a way to generate as much life force that was not connected to any particular trait line, since I'm going full offensive here, and wasn't connected to like weapon skills. Because when the early versions of my build, which you can see on my early Necromancer daily builds, I wasn't using Shouts, and I was having life force issues because I was purely dependent on Blighter's Boon. What I started doing is Your Soul is Mine, which is the heal shout here. It grants 5% life force every time it's used, and it grants an additional 3% for each target hit, which means if you hit the maximum of 5 targets, that's 20% life force. That's a lot of life force. So you just spam this all the time, and it has a really low cooldown when traded, so again, you just spam it. Like, you should always use this right at the beginning of the match. It's 5% free life force. And then, of course, since I've got Blighter's Boon, You Are All Weakenings, which has a base might generation of 5, will also generate life force. So I'm just spamming these shouts all the time. And of course, You Are All Weakenings is also the shortest cooldown stun break available to a Necromancer, short of taking the trait in Soul Reaping that makes Shroud a stun break. And it also, this is AoE weakness. Again, weakness. It's really strong. It's really nice. And, you know, there's also the Augury of Death. I've got Lifesteal on all my shouts, but that's not really something huge. I'm using Suffer. The nice thing about Suffer is it doesn't have the passive that Plague Signet has, because like the Plague Signet passive will kill you all the time, where like you'll be trying to disengage and it'll transfer an immob to you, which will just kill you right there. I've also been like deleted by burn guards, because it'll like pull every single burn the burn guards apply to all of my teammates and put them all on me, and I'll get one shot by like 28 stacks of burning. Not happy. I've had that happen a few times. So just not having that is nice. Obviously the problem with Suffer though is it's only one condition transferred per target, which means if you're in a small fight, so a 2v2 or 1v1, you're not going to get a lot of value out of it unless one of those targets is like a minion Necro or a Mesmer. So that brings to the first problem with shouts, and the problem that kind of holds a lot of shout builds back is how to deal with Condi cleanses. I took Ruin of the Soldier. Obviously, basically every shout build will take this specifically to get rid of the Condi cleanse issue. You're still going to have issues with burst cleansing. Like if you get hit with like a Plague Signet Condi bomb from a Necro, you're not going to be able to cleanse that. You're going to have to be really proactive about dodging Condi bomb skills. Like, it's just a skill thing. And then since I've got all these defensive stats on Ruin of the Soldier, I can pick up a Marauder Amulet. I don't need to have a Toughness Amulet or a Paladins, which is, I was running Paladins on the early versions of this build before I went to Shouts. So you end up, and this is just fairly good synergy. I mean, I got 26,000 HP, which kind of makes up for the lost Shroud buffer that I lost when I got rid of Soul Reaping. And then Sigils, why am I using Greatsword? Well, first off, I don't have Soul Reaping, so I don't have unblockable marks. And my marks don't generate life force, so Staff just is... excuse me. Staff just isn't all that exciting. And I know a lot of people like to ridicule Greatsword. Greatsword's probably the most undervalued weapon a Necro has. Because one of the capabilities that Greatsword has that no other weapon has is the life force generating skills on this greatsword, Death Spiral and Grasp Charges. They scale with target struck. No other Necro weapon set does this. Staff does not give you life force per struck. It's only 3% on hit. These, if you hit 4 people with Death Spiral, each one of those ticks on each one of those people is 2%. So just hitting, so that's 6 strikes with 2. So just hitting one person with Death Spiral is straight up going to give you 12% life force. If you hit 2 people, you just went up to 24% life force from this skill. You see how this stacks up. Grasping Darkness, again, 4% life force per target struck. Like, that's crazy. I know that if you do this, and then combo it into that, on a number of targets struck, like if I went over to the golems and did that, I could easily get 40% life force just from those 2. And obviously, the other nice thing, this applies to chill. So when you hit someone with this, not only are you getting 4% life force per target strike, you're chilling them, which brings in this trait into play. Chilling Victory, striking a chilled foe grants might and life force. So again, you just chilled them. So when you combo in this, you're now going to proc this, which will give you 2% life force. Every time this procs this is 2% life force, 1% straight up from the trait, and then it grants might, which sets Blighter's boon off, which is again 1% life force every time you give yourself a boon. So like, if you want to generate a large amount of life force rapidly in a team fight, there's your combo. Also, this skill, most undervalued skill, or that, yeah, basically, people always underestimate the skill. People always like to talk about Gravedigger, and you know, because it's got this huge damage coefficient. Gravedigger is super situational. You don't use this much. Like, I'll occasionally snipe someone when I think it's pertinent, and when I think I can get it off, but really, you don't use this. This is your bread and butter damage skill right here. Because it's a faster cast, it grants you life force, and it stacks a crap ton of Vuln. It's also more consistent damage than Gravedigger, because since its damage is spread across 6 hits, you're not going to get ruined by bad RNG. Because like Gravedigger, if it doesn't crit, it's only going to hit the target for like 3k, which is nothing to write home about, particularly for a 1 1/4 second cast. Nightfall, which brings us to Nightfall. Best point hate skill in the game. Obviously, like, it only ticks once every 2 seconds, so it's not the biggest damage thing ever, but it's blinding them, crippling, and corrupting a boon. Like, if you want to get some point hate down, this is the skill for it. It's also good for putting it on downs, so that making rezzing harder for the enemy team. It is a dark combo field, so you can whirl and shroud for leeching bolts, which will heal you through shroud. It's not a ton of healing though, but it is something to remember. Although obviously in most situations you'll want to do the chill field combo rather than a dark field combo. An interesting facet about Nightfall horror comboing is every time Nightfall expands, it's creating a new instance of a combo field, which means if you cast Nightfall, go into Shroud, and then cast the number 4 or the number 5 skill in Shroud, and then cast the number 4, you'll get the chill field even though Nightfall's under it. Because every time it expands, it creates a new instance which resets its priority as a combo field.
You are all
and let me see if I can do that right now. I'm gonna generate some boons.
chill to the bone.
I don't really have any good way to generate life force right now.
Your soul is
There we go.
mine.
That's probably enough. So, see, and you get chilling even though you've got the Nightfall under it. And of course, Axe, Warhorn. I don't think I should have to talk about why these 2 weapons are the weapons you want. I mean, you got 2 corrupts, AoE corrupts. That's a huge playmaker. I'm a little sad they got rid of the retail generation because that was really nice with Blighter's boon. And obviously, this is unblockable. This is the whole reason you take a Warhorn all the time is this skill. Unblockable days. One of the bigger playmaker skills on a Necro. This, spam it all the time. This is how you get life force. This thing. Use it on downs, use it on people not blocking. Do try not to waste it though, because again, it is a huge chunk of your life force generation in combat. You do generate life force in Locust form, so that is something to bear in mind. I prefer not, a lot of Necros like to cast this right out of the gate in a match. I prefer not to do that unless my team just straight up doesn't give me any swiftness and I need to get there. because I'll use this in a team fight, and every time it strikes someone around me, there's life force. In fact, it's actually going to get, and it also, since it procs swiftness when I cast it, that's 1% life force right there. Obviously not a huge amount, but hey, it's there. And of course, it cripples people around you, good for kiting melees, you know. And I think that pretty much sums up this build. Oh, one thing I forgot to talk about, Cold Shoulder. Chilled foes do less damage. Another reason to take Chilling Darkness. More chill equals less damage taken. Again, if you're dealing with Condi classes, Plague Sending's your friend. And that's pretty much it. A couple synergy things. Since you're using Shout Runes, you'll synergize really well with a support Ellie. I mean, obviously every Necro build synergizes well with a support Ellie except for Minion Master. But with this build putting out AoE Condi Clear because of Soldier Runes, and the Ellie will also have Soldier Runes, and the Ellie will have Shouts, you can get a ton of Condi hate for your entire team in a team fight. Like, you can basically single-handedly shut down a Burn Guard because, you know, every time flies burn, I just pull out a Shout, and then all of my teammates no longer have burn on them. Great. And of course, this is also useful. You should always keep in mind, if you're fighting a class like a Burn Guard or a Condi Rev, is to pay attention to if your teammates have Condis on them. Just look to see if they're getting hit, and you know, you can pull out a Shout and cleanse that stuff off them and really help your teammates. If you're working with a Power Rev, the Power Rev will love you for this because they don't have a lot of cleansing, so having someone else cleansing them will make their day so much better. And I think, yeah, that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about with this build.